is KC Sports Network, proudly presented by Emprise Bank.
Hello and welcome into another edition of Three Ma. I am John Kurtz, joined by Cole Manbeck today. It'll be just us two recapping K-State's win in the granddaddy of them all, the Pop-Tarts Bowl. It's Wildcats knock off NC State. Avery Johnson, your Pop-Tarts Bowl MVP, and the Wildcats in what was at the time the most watched bowl game of bowl season got to take down the edible Pop-Tart mascot. So much to discuss here on the show, and raise a glass. Happy New Year, by the way. Raise a glass as we record this here on January 1st from our friends at Holiday Distillery, whether it is your 360 vodka or your Ben Holiday bottled and bond bourbon. Either one a great choice to celebrate the new year, celebrate K-State getting the bowl win, and lots of positive momentum and positive vibes heading into the 2024 season. Please support them. Great K-State folks who support us. And once again, hope you had a wonderful Christmas and a very happy New Year. I know K-State is feeling a lot better after winning 28-19. Pretty good performance all the way around from this squad. Jumped down in front 14-0, 21-7. It got a little bit dicey there. The fake punt certainly was a frustration, and NC State draws within two for a good portion of that game, but really methodical, determined drive by K-State after having a punt return touchdown called back, a long screen pass taken in for a touchdown called back. Avery Johnson winds up finding Jace Brown in the end zone for a back-breaking touchdown to make it 28-19. And hey, when you only give up 19 points, hard to complain. And when you score 28 points on a top 20 defense at NC State with a first-time play caller and a first-time starting quarterback, it's tough to complain much about that either, Cole.
Yeah, I mean, we asked, I think it was on the preview pod, we brought up the question, what does a good offensive performance look like with Avery Johnson at quarterback and Conor Riley calling plays against a North Carolina State defense that came into the game 14th in Brian Freemau's FEI ratings? It's a North Carolina State defense over the last 3 years. It's ranked in the top 15 of the FEI nationally, and a terrific unit that came into the game 6th in interception percentage, 3rd in takeaways per game or turnovers forced per game. And K-State goes out there and puts up 28 points. And when you look at it from a points per drive standpoint and you take away garbage time, it's the most points per drive North Carolina State's defense has given up this year. K-State averaged 2.8 points per drive. You take away garbage time, the next closest is Notre Dame at 2.7 points per drive. If you want to include garbage time, which I had done, and that's when games are a blowout and out of hand, and there's a metric that excludes some of the scores late in the game. If you want to include that, and I had in my tweet that I had put out right after the game or the next day after the game, Notre Dame was 3 points per drive, K-State 2.8, just second behind Notre Dame as second best performance. So either way you slice it, that's a really good North Carolina State defense. And I know they didn't have Peyton Wilson, the Chuck Bednarik Award winner, the best linebacker in the country, the best defensive player in the country. And that's a big loss. But they had most of their other starters playing. And like I'd mentioned, they were 6th in the country in interception percentage, that 4.4% on the season. Their secondary was good. They were a top 20. They were the second best pass efficiency defense K-State faced this season, behind only Iowa State when you look at those rankings. And K-State went out there, put up 28 points. People like to look at like Avery Johnson's final box score, and if they didn't watch the game, they might see 45% completion percentage. But if we're being honest, people that did watch the game recognize the maturity that Avery Johnson showed. Threw numerous balls away. He had 3 drops that I would characterize as drops probably, and threw 5 or 6 balls away. So I thought Avery Johnson played just fine. And I thought the offense was pretty darn good outside of a third quarter stretch where they struggled.
Yeah, and if we're talking about players being out again, Ben Sinnott was K-State's best offensive weapon this year, and he didn't play in the game. Phillip Brooks was the most consistent and reliable wide receiver that they had throughout the year. He didn't play in the game as both of those guys opt out to get ready for the draft coming up. So, look, in some ways that evens out with what Avery Johnson had to deal with. And you're right. I mean, his poise is really, really impressive to watch. I mean, he does not try to force anything. You look at other guys, like, I think this is what drives the point home for me. You look at other guys that were playing in bowl games that were true freshmen and highly regarded true freshmen, like Jackson Arnold at Oklahoma. Now, he had some spectacular plays, but he also had, Oklahoma had 6 turnovers in that game, I believe. So, he was kind of a turnover machine. Lincoln, what's Lincoln's last name? Kineholz or whatever, the running for Ohio State. Yeah. I mean, he looked awful. Ohio State couldn't move the ball at all. Scored 3 points against Missouri. He's another pretty highly touted freshman. I was just reading a story from The Athletic about Arch Manning as we head into the college football playoff matchups where, like, they're talking about how he didn't play the entire year, and it just was another reminder, like, okay, this was the most heralded freshman out there in the country, and Texas played Malik Murphy over him when they needed to throw a backup quarterback in, and we saw Malik Murphy in that game against K-State, like, definitely a turnover-prone dude, so it just tells you that Avery Johnson is pretty far ahead of where a lot of other freshmen are across the country. So, and look, he was the bowl game MVP, and I thought he played really well, but it's even further accentuated for me when you start to look at other talented true freshmen across the country and see how they actually performed when they got a chance with the lights on.
Oh, let's just stay with that point, John. I mean, I tweeted this out. I pulled the numbers a couple days ago after the bowl game and looked at all the different numbers. Now, this doesn't include Lincoln Kienholz's performance in his bowl game for Ohio State when he came in and went 6-17. But you just look like there aren't a lot of true freshman quarterbacks that play in college football. It's very rare. And Avery Johnson had a significant number of snaps this year as a true freshman. Now, in some cases, it's because, you know, these powerhouse programs have a top tier guy in front of them and they may be just as good, but aren't able to see the field as a result of that. But many of these guys, like you look at Dante Moore, number 2 quarterback in the On3 consensus this year, 32.6 quarterback rating. I pulled the top 15 quarterbacks in the On3 consensus rankings. Avery Johnson was number 9. Avery Johnson had the highest quarterback rating at 91.3 out of any of the top 15 guys. And nobody was really close outside of Aiden Childs, Oregon State quarterback, who had an 85.5 QBR. And if you actually remember, Aiden Childs was a guy that I believe took an official visit to K-State while they were recruiting Avery Johnson, and then he blew up on the recruiting trail. But outside of Aiden Childs at 85.5 QBR, the next closest guy is Nico Amaleva, the Tennessee quarterback. I know I just butchered his pronunciation. He's actually
I missed that. Can you repeat that?
Nico Amaleva. I don't know. He's the number 3 quarterback in the On3 consensus. He's actually. I'll learn how to pronounce it, John, shortly because we're recording this on New Year's Day, and he's starting for Tennessee in their bowl game in place of Joe Milton, who's opted out. He was the number 3 QB in the On3 consensus, 73.3 QBR. You mentioned Jackson Arnold. Jackson Arnold won the MVP of the Elite 11 that Avery Johnson also was in. Jackson Arnold was the number 10 quarterback or number 10 prospect in the entire country, according to On3. He had a 56.5 QBR this season. So, and then a lot of these other guys didn't qualify for the QBR metric, like Arch Manning, like Malachi Nelson, who now is in the portal, Eli Holstein of Alabama, J.J. Cole of Iowa State, on down the list. It just shows, how terrific Avery Johnson was this year and the maturity and the poise. You look at it, 11 touchdowns, 1 turnover for Avery Johnson this year. And the 1 turnover is really just giving him a turnover for that handoff against Houston when he came out of the game. And I guess, that's probably on Avery, but who knows? And he had another one where he fumbled at exchange, but he got it back earlier in the year as well. I just, you don't see like a quarterback with his athleticism is typically going to try to take off and run numerous times when nothing is there in the passing game. But how many times did we see it against North Carolina State, John, where Avery kept his eyes downfield constantly? He did not look to take off and run for the most part. And a couple times he delivered strikes that probably should have been caught while he was moving and kind of standing along the sideline looking for a receiver.
Well, to slam dunk this point home, Cole, and we'll see if these numbers sync up with what you have, because I am just taking this from a random person on Twitter, so I'll allow you to fact check this. But shout out to Cameron Koger on Twitter, who pointed out that Avery Johnson this year played 205 snaps, 775 total yards, 91.3 QBR, 12 total touchdowns, 0 interceptions. Jalen Daniels this year played 196 snaps, 779 total yards, so he's got 4 more total yards. At 82.7 QBR, that's 8-ish points lower than Avery Johnson. 5 total touchdowns, that's 7 less than Avery Johnson. 1 interception, that's 1 more than Avery Johnson. So, what do you think of those numbers? How much of a point does that make?
I don't know. I mean, Jalen Daniels sample, I guess a similar sample size because you did take into the snap counts. So it was just such a weird year for him. I don't know. I think I don't know if I'd take much from that necessarily. I think I would just probably, we saw everything that we wanted to see from Avery Johnson. is kind of my big takeaway, that this guy is going to be a star eventually, and probably next year, as long as they can get him some more skill talent, which we'll get into, in case they need some help at wide receiver to help fuel the Avery Johnson machine in this offense. But
because that was one of my frustrations from the game, is when he was, as you mentioned, like buying time and wanting to wait and try to throw the ball and keeping his eyes downfield. Numerous times there was nobody getting open. He was buying like 7, 8, 9 seconds and nobody was able to get open for him. A time or two there was a drop in that sort of scenario as well. So yeah, you need guys that are going to be able to create some separation and get open if he's going to be able to buy time like that.
I can only think of, John, and correct me if you remember others, I can only think of 2 throws that Avery Johnson made that weren't good throws in the game. He had the one, I think it was like a 3rd and 7 early on in the game, and Keegan Johnson was open over the middle of the field, and it short hopped when Avery threw it on the run. And then he had another one where Will Swanson was wide open. Avery was rolling out to his right to elude pressure, threw it on the run, and bounced it about 3 or 4 yards short. Those are really the only 2 really inaccurate throws that I can recall. Most of the others were throwaways, drops, or, guy just couldn't quite make a play. So I don't know. I thought he played a really nice game.
Well, that's kind of where we're at. I feel like the only area where he was struggling to make throws was on the run, on the move.
Yeah.
And, I think like that's understandable. It did feel like we saw a lot of that on his high school tape too, because nothing against the Mays offensive line, but I don't think his offensive line was all that great in high school. So he was having to make a lot of plays like scrambling around on the run. So I figure he has some kind of acumen for that. But look, obviously that'll be something that you want to shore up, and maybe something that he'll have to do more of as we look out to the offensive line having to break in 3 new starters. You could argue that they'll have basically 2 to 3 starters back, maybe 2 new starters, if you want to say that, losing KT Leviston and losing Cooper Beebe. So maybe a little more of a struggle at the beginning of the year, but I'm sure that's something that they'll work on with QB coach to be determined here throughout the offseason. But yeah, and speaking of separation, another one, I can think of the Keegan Johnson play where he wasn't able to create much separation. Avery dropped in a pretty nice ball down the sideline, but there was nowhere really to put it because Keegan Johnson had not been able to separate much from his guy. So yeah, I don't want to come down on the receivers too terribly hard in that performance. They did enough, and Jace Brown certainly made some really nice plays. But yeah, he'll need a little bit more help. He will definitely need a little bit more help. And DJ Giddens will help as well, because DJ Giddens had a really nice game, and we definitely need to talk about DJ. But we will do that after we tell you about our friends at Home Field Apparel. If you guys have been listening to the show for a while, you know about Home Field Apparel. HomeFieldApparel.com is the place to get not only 100 plus NCAA schools, tons of retro logos, all the shirts, clothes, any kind of gear that you could possibly want, but they have 40 plus K-State items there. You guys see us donning that gear very consistently here on the show. It's what everybody's wearing these days. We're trying to get you hip. We're trying to get you cool. Make sure you check out what HomeFieldApparel.com has to offer, and we will even give you 15% off your first order. If you have a holiday gift you need to get for somebody after the fact because you messed up and forgot, 15% off at HomeFieldApparel.com using promo code 3MA23. We are back in just a moment.
Thanks for listening to KC Sports Network. Make sure you download our new app. Find it on the App Store or Google Play. Just search KC Sports Network.
So DJ Giddens had a great game, man. He's getting overshadowed right now because in the Big 12, Ollie Gordon's coming back. He's the Doak Walker Award winner. Devin Neal's coming back. He is a phenomenal running back. Taj Brooks is coming back. He is a phenomenal running back. Got PJ Harvey at UCF. I would say Abu Sama, Iowa State, but I don't know what exactly happened in the Liberty Bowl. Must have left it all on the field in Manhattan, I suppose. DJ Giddens, 28 carries, 151 yards. That's 5.4 a carry. He had a touchdown, and he also had the 37-yard touchdown reception, which was one of the most impressive plays, by the way, for Avery Johnson of the game, where it was a check. He recognized, got into it, didn't panic when a blitz came right in his face, and dumped it off to DJ, who had a pretty easy coast to the end zone. But, man, as we look ahead to next year, DJ Giddens is a really good player. He has turned into a very good running back. And I think it's the combo of not only everything else in the Big 12 that's going on, but he's the guy that's following Deuce Vaughn that probably keeps him from getting as much attention as maybe he deserves, and perhaps a sprinkle of his kind of I saw somebody say like Kawhi Leonard-esque personality, which is very, very apropos. I mean, that's exactly what it is. He definitely has like the Kawhi Leonard sort of personality that's not like really bright and bubbly. He's a man of few words, but he sure knows how to run with the football.
Oh, well, let me just give you some numbers to put in perspective how good DJ Giddens has been, both in his 2-year career of playing, well, 3 years, but he redshirted as a freshman, and then also this season when he had 1,226 yards on the ground. 10th most rushing yards in a season in K-State history. He passed Colin Klein's 2011 season when he had 1,141 yards on the ground with his performance in the bowl game when DJ rushed for 151 yards on 28 carries. Only needed 40 yards this year to pass both Josh Scobie's 2001 season and Daniel Thomas's 2009 campaign for the 8th most. So that gives you an idea of how good DJ Giddens was this year. And actually, if you want to break it down.
I'll just interject to say, I mean, remember the 2009 season, I mean, that was K-State's only offense that year. That Daniel Thomas year, like he was, and it seemed like he was just a superstar because he carried that team to 6 wins. Yeah, absolutely carried them. So yeah, that one hits home for me for sure.
Well, and I think so. Daniel Thomas then in 2010 as well. He took it even another level. I think he had almost 1,500, or maybe even went over 1,500 yards. I mean, people just forget how good Daniel Thomas was as a running back for Kansas State. He was the workhorse for that team for 2 years. When you look at it at an individual level, like top rushing seasons in school history from individual level. So I said he's 10th most rushing yards in a season, but in those 10. Darren Sproles had 3 seasons where he's in the top 10. Daniel Thomas had 2. Deuce Vaughn had 2. Alex Barnes 1. Josh Scobie 1. And DJ Giddens 1. So 6th best from an individual player perspective. 3rd most rushing yards in school history by a sophomore. 8th best yards per carry in a season for a player with 100 minimum rushes in K-State history. DJ averaged 6.15 yards per touch this season. Deuce Vaughn last year in 2022 averaged 5.8 yards per touch. Deuce in 2021 had 6.6 yards per touch. Deuce in his career, 6.4 yards per touch. And this is including receptions and carries. DJ in his career, 6.2 yards per touch. So 0.2 yards behind what Deuce Vaughn did in his career, based off what DJ has done in his career. DJ, 4th most all-purpose yards returning in the Big 12 next season, 1,549 yards all-purpose on 252 touches. 9 guys in the Big 12 with over 1,000 yards, all-purpose yards returning at the running back position. John with 7 guys who rushed for over 1,000 yards. That doesn't even include talented running backs like Jaheim White and C.J. Donaldson of West Virginia. So just a terrific season by DJ Giddens, and just gets kind of overlooked, honestly, because he's so quiet, his demeanor, and I don't know. He's a terrific player and an all-purpose back. I mean, he's great in the receiving game, and can't wait to see what he builds upon next year. And they're going to have to rely on him. And it's not going to probably be quite as many holes early in the year as they're replacing the whole offensive line. So, but I'm just blown away with how many times DJ is contacted in the backfield, John, or at the line of scrimmage, and he finds ways to slice and dice. He's shiftier than most people would imagine. He's faster than most people think, and he finds ways to get 7 or 8 yards on plays when nothing's there.
Yeah, I feel like he's a great back at finding hidden yards where, you feel like he's going to be down and he'll spin off of somebody for an extra 2, 3, 4 yards. That's the kind of thing where he really excels at. I feel like he finds a lot of yards where it doesn't appear that there's much there. So yeah, I mean, he'll be great, and the offensive line deserves a shout out too, particularly because all of those guys decided to come back and play the game. And again, but you have like 2 to 3 guys that have some starting experience there that should be back, but Cooper Beebe, Casey Leviston, Hayden Gillum, guys like that did not have to come through and play that game, and they definitely did. And Cooper Beebe got the storybook ending that he really deserved, because he gets literally a pancake on essentially the last snap, the last serious snap that K-State took in the game before they went victory formation. So, I mean, it doesn't work out much better than that. I mean, that one belongs on the highlight reel right next to the one that he had against Houston that everybody was replaying over and over again. So just have to give a hat tip and a shout out to Cooper Beebe for everything he's done in his career. I think there's no doubt he's going to be the first offensive lineman to be up in the Ring of Honor at Bill Snyder Family Stadium before too long here.
Just put him in the Ring of Honor in the first game next year, John. I mean, that dude shouldn't have to wait. I know everybody's had to wait their turn, but consensus All-American, all-around awesome dude, great family, love his parents, they're awesome. And I'm thrilled that we got Camden still in the rotation to come up. I got a little sad thinking the BB family was done. And then I remembered we got Camden, who redshirted this year and is, going to be a good player for Kansas State down the road as well. But just so incredibly grateful for Cooper Beebe, and not surprised at all that he played in this bowl game. He doesn't have the mentality to opt out. He's always there for his teammates, and what a guy, man. And what a player. Can't wait to see what he does in the NFL moving forward. And on the offensive line front, I mean, you're going to probably be okay on the right-hand side because you're going to have Carver Willis back at right tackle. And, he really solidified his play over the back half of the season to the point where I feel really good about him going into next year. And then you're going to have Taylor Portier and Hadley Panzer, who both have played a significant number of snaps at guard. Now, do they want each of those to man the right and left guard, or do they want to kind of rotate each one in and out? Can one play center? Or is Sam Heck the guy they go to at center, former walk-on? There's some questions to be determined there. That left-hand side has been such a stalwart. I mean, we talk about Cooper Beebe so much, but KT Leviston's a stud. KT Leviston has a great shot to get drafted at left tackle and play. He can play guard or tackle. Love KT and what he did. So, can John Pastore step in? The schedule is hard. There is not, you look ahead to next year, there are not a lot of opportunities baked in to ease these guys in. I mean, you're going to be playing maybe your highest ranked non-con opponent and since Auburn. Am I missing one? I mean, Arizona is going to come in probably top 15.
What was Auburn ranked? I'm curious. I'm going to go look that up, what Auburn was ranked in that game. Because, Arizona may be they should be top 15 for sure.
I think Auburn was ranked 5th, right, John? I'm pretty sure they came into Manhattan 5th.
You're right. It was 5th. That is such a pitch of a non-con game that gets in there that was scheduled a long time ago when Arizona was not this.
K-State has the worst. K-State has had some terrible luck with some of these non-con opponents. You look at Tulane, Tulane when they scheduled them, what were they? And now of course Willie Fritz has moved on and he's going to be at Houston, which K-State will have to face him going on the road to Houston next year. But John Summerall takes over at Tulane. Troy, head coach, transfers over there, and he's a good coach. So it's going to be another tough non-con, and I only bring that point up because there's not going to be a lot of opportunity to ease that offensive line in, and you're going to be breaking in a whole new left side in all likelihood and a center. So that's going to be a challenge, and that's going to be a big question mark. They're bringing in Easton Kilty, a transfer. Andrew Langang, are we going to see him finally get to play significant snaps, and can he be what we thought he was when they recruited him? And then John Pastore at tackle, Drake Beckwith, and another guy who's played a little bit. We'll see. I mean, that it seems like they're done at offensive line, and we can talk about that on another show more in depth. But I don't know if they're going to bring in another transfer there. I think they might rely on the guys they've got.
Well, and another piece of that is going to be that we'll see what Conor Riley's role is going to be. I guess that's to be determined here, but he may be the offensive coordinator, primary play caller, which would add a lot more onto his plate as opposed to just developing the offensive line. So he got a chance to take the reins, call the plays, be the offensive coordinator for the bowl game. And I actually heard him say, I was listening to the pregame show with Wyatt as I was driving around before the game on Thursday, and I did hear Conor Riley say when he was being interviewed there, he was asked about what about being up in the booth as opposed to being down on the field, which is clearly a change for him. And he said, well, I don't worry about it because I've got such veteran guys. He did mention somebody else on the coaching staff helping out there too, and forgive me, I spaced on the name.
Vincent Johnson?
Might have been it.
He's a graduate assistant, or he's got a role on the offensive line. So, yeah.
He specifically pointed out, look, I've got a veteran group, so I don't really worry about it too much. And then now we're talking about, hey, if he's doing that, it's going to be games 2, 3, 4, etc. of him doing that, still getting used to it. And now you're not going to have nearly as veteran a group on the offensive line. So that is something to monitor as we move forward. And we'll talk about where things are going with OC here in just a moment. But as far as the performance in game goes, I thought Conor Riley was pretty solid. Started out very solid, ended pretty solid in the middle. There was definitely a lull there, and drops didn't help. I mean, there were things that were working against him that were somewhat out of his control, but I did feel like got a little bit too conservative with the run game at points in time. But in fairness, we were screaming at Colin Klein in the game at Texas to get away from the run, and he waited probably too long in order to do that. So it's just a lot of runs up the middle with DJ Giddens on 1st and 10 that were setting them up in second and long situations that made it more difficult, obviously, to convert. I didn't love what was it, after a penalty, they had like a 2nd and 16, and they're not even going with Joe Jackson, which was a little peculiar and frustrating. I know to most of us that have had high hopes for him at running back, and so couple of play calls that were head scratchers and left you feeling like it was a bit conservative. But I think all in all, it's hard to argue too much with 28 points against that defense when you were working without your tight end that's going to get drafted, your most reliable wide receiver, and a first-time starter at quarterback.
Yeah, K-State ends up rushing for 257 yards. The most North Carolina State had allowed this season was 194 in a game. Now, I will say 30 of those rushing yards came on a fake punt by Jack Bloomer, so it's really 227 yards by the K-State offense, still the most that North Carolina State allowed this season. I thought the offense was fine. I thought, there were a couple drives in the third quarter where Conor Riley might have been a little slow to adjust as North Carolina State adjusted to what K-State was doing, because the first down runs were working in the first half, and then they clearly made it a point of emphasis to bottle that up. To start the third quarter, K-State was a little slow offensively out of the gate. There were also a couple times, like there was a play where he had it dialed up really well to Garrett Oakley. It would have been a tunnel screen over the middle of the field. And I can't remember if it got just tipped or Garrett Oakley just dropped it. Garrett Oakley's going to be a star at Kansas State at tight end, so I'm not worried at all there. But that play would have went for big yardage from what it looked like. He had it dialed up perfectly. The Jaden Jackson play for a 50-plus yard screen where Garrett Oakley made a tremendous block and got called for a hold that was BS. That would have been a touchdown. That eventually got taken off the board because of that call. There were some play calls I really liked. There was a drop. I can't remember. Seth had a drop at one point that would have extended a drive where Avery had rolled out. There was another drop down the field. I think it was Jaden Jackson that was probably 20 yards down the field.
I thought it was Seth. Wasn't it Seth and Keegan that each had a drop?
Well, I don't remember. I don't remember Keegan having one. I remember the one. Remember Jaden and Jace Brown were running a route kind of in the same area there, right. And it was Jaden.
I'm thinking of Keegan slipping on the around.
Yeah, and that play could have went for pretty good yards.
John. That looked like there was a lot there. I thought there was a lot there when he slipped and fell.
Yeah. So, I mean, at the end of the day, and I think Fan had pointed out K-State also had the most yardage rate against North Carolina State this season as well. So, the thing that I love the most, John, is we know Avery Johnson doesn't want to be a true running quarterback. Like, he'll run the ball, but he does not want to line up and run the ball 10 plus times a game and design QB runs. That's not what he wants. And that's, he's not built to really be that battering ram quarterback. And Conor Riley only called, maybe two design QB runs for Avery?
It was only one until the very end of the game when they had that last drive where they used him to pick. I think there were two on the last drive when they had him pick up the first down on fourth down, and I think there was like one more after that. But before that, there was one, and it was that third down. It was like a 3rd and 4, 3rd and 5, something like that. And it worked brilliantly. It was great and got him a first down. Yeah, they kind of used that as a break glass in case of emergency sort of thing, only in situations where they absolutely had to have it. And when he did it at the end of the game, it kind of felt like hey, we probably can't pass here without looking like a-holes and running up the score. So go get it, kid. Like, see if you can go get in the end zone and score. So I thought they did a really nice job, Conor did, in managing that part of the game for Avery. And, one thing Chris Kleiman said after the game was like, hey, he was really the only quarterback we felt comfortable with out there, which is nothing against Knuth. It's just like, hey, I mean, we're still trying to get you ready to roll, and probably not fair to be putting another quarterback out there. So lots of reasons. I'm sure Avery wanted to show off he can throw the ball. I'm sure they wanted to let transfer wide receivers know they can throw the ball, and it's not going to be just an offense that's about Avery Johnson being a running back. But also they had to worry about who was behind him there at QB. Yeah, no, that definitely makes sense. And Avery's two best runs in the game were the scrambles. I mean, it was a 20-yard scramble for a touchdown, and then he had an 18-yard scramble, I think, on 3rd and 10, which was right after the Jaden Jackson play was called back for a touchdown. It ended up, John, being a real blessing in disguise that Kansas State's punt return was called back for a touchdown and then Jaden Jackson's was, because they end up having a 15-play drive that eats up almost 8 minutes of clock and puts the game away as a result. If those aren't called back, North Carolina State's got 8-9 minutes left in the game, down 9 points, still with an opportunity to get back in it, win it potentially. I think
it was almost, like I said, almost a blessing in disguise because you got to see Avery Johnson in this offense step up in crucial situations. You mentioned the handoff on 2nd and 16 to get him into 3rd and 13. Avery Johnson just stays in the pocket and delivers a strike to Keegan Johnson over the middle of the field, 16 yards, gets a first down on 3rd and 13. And then they have a 3rd and 10 after that penalty, and Avery Johnson just smoothly rolls out to his left and scrambles for an easy 20 yards, gets the first down, multiple big conversions. And then I think they also had a 4th and 1 conversion on that drive as well. And, they iced the game away, win it by 9 points. They were 2.5, 3-point favorites. And overall they end up now, over the last 2 years of the Chris Kleiman era, they're 19-8. First time they've won 9 or more games since 2011, 2012 in back-to-back seasons, and second best winning percentage. If you look at the current Big 12, not including the newcomers that did come in this last year in BYU and Houston, Cincinnati, et cetera, you look at the 10 kind of legacy schools that are in there right now. K-State is the second best win percentage at 70% over the last 2 years, behind only Texas at 77%. So really nice to get that win, carry that momentum forward, throw Avery Johnson 31 times, put some things on tape for receivers you're chasing in the transfer portal. And then I think I'd be remiss, John, if we didn't shout out Jace Brown, who, over his last 7 games this year had 401 yards receiving, 25 receptions, really came on. And Jace Brown ended the year with 437 yards receiving. That's the most ever by a K-State true freshman receiver. He surpassed Deuce Vaughn's 434 yards as a true freshman for the most yards ever by a true freshman in Kansas State school history. And if you include redshirt freshmen, he's 3rd most ever behind Kevin Lockett and Aaron Lockett. Aaron Lockett had 928 in 1998, and Kevin Lockett had 700 and something, I think, in 1993. So just an incredible year by Jace Brown, and he could really be that dude going forward.
I mean, I love him. I absolutely love him. You think about like Tyler Lockett I remember thinking a really nice freshman year back in 2011 in a season in which K-State won 10 games. I mean, he had 18 catches for 246 yards and 3 touchdowns. Also made an impact on special teams, fair to mention, but just to give you a little perspective on the numbers that Jace Brown put up this year. And he's a guy, slighter build. He can, I don't want to put this type of comparison on him. Obviously, Tyler Lockett's a phenom, but he gets open with his route running, and he's a guy that's smaller in stature. And I really like the fact that he's a guy that creates separation consistently with his route running, which I think is great. That's what they need. He had some really big moments, huge catch for a touchdown in that Texas game as a part of the comeback. The game winner in the Pop-Tarts Bowl, like the guy, the play at the beginning of the Kansas game to really get the offense going. Like he had a knack for making really big plays at key times throughout the back half of the season. So very, very thrilled for where the future is going with him, no doubt.
And showed that he can make a contested catch. He's shown that he can separate, but making that touchdown catch and the fade into the corner, one-on-one, just going up and making a play, the ability to adjust his body in the air and make a play on a ball, that was another thing that we just saw from him. So he's got all the makings. Truthfully, we talk about K-State needing wide receiver transfer help, and they do. Jace Brown really does have the makings to be a number 1 wide receiver in this offense. And, if he takes that next step, he could be that next year. And you got Keegan Johnson back. You're going to have Jaden Jackson back at receiver as well. I think my biggest disappointment, honestly, was not seeing Joe Jackson or Trey Spivey in the bowl game. I really wanted to see Trey Spivey as well. He's that different type of build wide receiver, 6'3", 6'4", really athletic. Thought maybe we would see him get some snaps. He didn't in the game, it's interesting because Trey Spivey played in the very first game of the year, John. We saw that flash of him on the pass hit from Avery Johnson to him, and then we just really didn't see him the rest of the year. He's a guy that got in the summer. He wasn't here for spring ball, so hopefully an offseason does him well, and he can be a playmaker next year at receiver because he's a different type that you don't have right now. Keegan Johnson and Jace aren't those bigger receivers. Jaden's decent size, but they need Trey Spivey to step forward, and then they're going to need a couple transfers to help him out.
Well, they've been chasing a couple. Who's the Troy kid? You're going to remember these names.
Jabre Barber from Troy had 999 yards receiving this last year. Really good player. Shows some nice bursts. He'd probably be a slot guy. He's 5'10". It looks like I saw a report, John. He was initially going to visit K-State, Michigan State, and Mississippi State. He is visiting K-State on January 3rd per DY when the dead period ends and he can take visits. But I think I saw that like now he's also going to visit Texas A&M, Florida State, and South Carolina. So I would have rather been going up against Mississippi State and Michigan State, but some of the heavy hitters are now in on him. So
yeah, that's a bummer, and that's one of the tougher things about where we're at now in the portal. I mean, guys that are good that are going to be around are going to be pretty sought after. But I mean, hey, they got Keegan Johnson away from Texas A&M and Notre Dame last year, and we felt like that was a pretty big coup at the time. So, you know, hopefully the allure of playing with Avery and K-State stepping up its NIL game, which we know is happening now too, can help out there. But then what was the one from the other day?
Elijah Surratt. I'm probably mispronouncing that. James Madison, wide receiver. I assume you're talking about, John?
Yeah, correct.
Yeah. Nearly 1,200 yards receiving. Actually transferred from, I believe, the FCS level, where he was an All-American the season prior. He's been in college football for 2 years now. Had nearly 1,200 yards, I think 8 touchdowns this last year. K-State offered him just recently. He just entered the portal. His coach went to Indiana as the head coach there. I don't perceive Indiana to probably be the threat, even though his head coach went there, because Indiana's already landed 3 or 4 transfer wide receivers, including Miles Price, who K-State was chasing. So that would surprise me. I don't know if there's any connection necessarily to this guy. He's from Virginia originally, so I couldn't really trace back a connection with Matthew Middleton or anything, but K-State offered him. He posted the offer. We'll see if it sounds like they're hot and heavy after him. He's a 6'2", 210-pound receiver. Would love to get him in on a visit, but I'm sure some big-time programs are also going to be all over him. Look, you got to get at least one really good dude. Like, I want to, but that's probably going to be hard. If you can at least get one stud, I'll feel good about going into next year.
I'd have a hard time thinking that they'd be able to sell 2 guys. Yeah, especially 2 guys that would make everybody really, really happy based on who is coming back, which is Keegan and Jaden. Everybody that you're already going to have. But yeah, correct. Definitely need one. I would feel pretty good with one. Any other transfer portal stuff, needs that you're really concerned about as of right now? I mean, I know we would like a nose guard at some point. I don't think that we've seen a whole lot on that front.
Yeah, I mean, I think I'd like another body at nose tackle, but we haven't heard of any new names since they missed out on the JUCO kid from Tyler Junior College who chose Baylor instead, took an official visit to K-State. Haven't heard any new names there. I would still like, and we'll do another pod with DY when he gets back and talk to him about his thoughts on this too and some updates on transfer portal. But I think we would probably like, and I think we're in agreement on this, John, a transfer running back at this point, because we didn't see Joe Jackson in the bowl game, and that's a little discouraging, to be honest. And so you're going to be going into next year with 3 freshman running backs, including Joe Jackson, because he redshirted this year. And then you're going to have 2 freshman running backs and J.P. Price coming in from Blue Valley and Devon Rice from Bishop Gorman out in Vegas, who's an explosive guy. I like him. But you're talking about 3 guys that really haven't done anything in their career, being the second string running back, one of them. So I would like to get a transfer running back if that's available. At least 1 transfer receiver, ideally 2 that are solid there. I wouldn't mind another offensive line transfer, but I don't know if they're going to be able to get that. I don't think that's as big on the priority list. I think they're good at D end. I don't really think linebacker's a huge need. I wouldn't mind a transfer corner. Just to give him another body, a quality body there, because you got Keenan Garber and Jacob Parrish, and you feel good about them. I think Justice James can be a guy that can play next year. He played some in the bowl game as well. But I think it would be helpful to have another guy at corner.
Tough part about running back is like, man, that's really threading a needle, because you've also got a really accomplished guy who had 1,500 yards from scrimmage this year, and DJ Giddens leading the charge. So that may be a tough putt to get somebody in there, but we'll see. Offensive coordinator. Look, we would all guess, I think, that Conor Riley probably gets the job, but maybe a passing game coordinator, co-offensive coordinator situation could be in the works here. It does sound like there's some consideration being given to an outside candidate. You know more than I do on that front, so I'll give you the floor here. But what are you hearing right now as far as the offensive coordinator goes?
Yeah, I mean, I wouldn't be surprised if it's more of a co-offensive coordinator type situation with Conor Riley, perhaps manning the run game aspect of it, and then another guy brought in to be the quarterback coach, kind of passing game coordinator of the offensive OC position. I think that's a possibility that's certainly being considered based off what we've heard. And look, there's an adjustment for Conor Riley. Again, you talked about it earlier, first time in the booth. Does he really want to be up in the booth? Or would he rather be down on the field? Now, a lot of play callers call plays down on the field, as you guys have pointed out to me as a reminder. But it may be something where he wouldn't mind having a, passing game type coordinator, and he coordinates the run game. Now, of course, that only brings back bad memories for me because I think K-State did that with Andre Coleman and Colin Klein, right, John? Or was it Demo?
Yeah.
And okay. Yeah, 2018. That was just a bad year overall. Not any reason for Colin Klein or anything. Because sometimes these co-offensive coordinator things don't work out the best. But I think that could be something that K-State is certainly exploring, to have a co-offensive coordinator. I would merely be speculating on names. I've heard no names. The thing is, like, if it's a co-offensive coordinator, you're not going to probably get like an up-and-comer. Like, we hear, I think, Willie Korn at Liberty. He's the OC there. His name mentioned. You hear Brennan Marion is an up-and-comer at UNLV offensive coordinator. Those guys aren't going to probably take a job as a co-OC, even though they're going up a level in competition. I think they probably have aspirations that they think they should be the main guy calling the plays and aren't going to be co-offensive coordinators. So then you're looking at, Matt Wells. His name has been mentioned, and that's only speculation, but he's an offensive analyst at Oklahoma currently. Matt Wells was the head coach at Texas Tech. He was the head coach at Utah State. At Utah State, he developed Jordan Love, who became a first-round pick, had a really nice game for the Green Bay Packers on New Year's Eve. Do they sell Avery and this offense with Matt Wells as a guy? He's friends with Chris Kleiman. Chris Kleiman's mentioned that before. Maybe he doesn't want to be an offensive analyst at OU and he wants to come on up here and be the passing game coordinator. Again, I don't know. That's a candidate that I would think that maybe K-State would outreach to if that's a something that they want to do.
Yeah, I mean, I got to be honest. I'm not real enthralled by Matt Wells. Texas Tech fans certainly would not be if you ask them. But I mean, hey, and I wonder too about him. I know he's just an analyst right now, but is he the type of guy that would want to be a co-offensive coordinator with, somebody who's just green as far as being an offensive coordinator at all in their career? I don't know. No idea. I'll be interested to see where it goes. I was frankly kind of surprised that it sounded like there was consideration being given to other things than just Conor Riley getting the job himself, especially after like Chris Kleiman really spoke glowingly about him after the game and the job that he did. But that's also what Kleiman does. Kleiman's going to ride for his guys, whether it's players or coaches, publicly like that. So anyway, we shall see. At this point, kind of resigned to, hey, it's probably going to be Conor Riley. We'll see about the rest of it. Because quarterback coach, if it's going to be just a quarterback coach and Conor Riley's the offensive coordinator, that probably changes the candidate pool a little bit. And I don't know, Cole, how much you want to say about the names there that we have speculated about a little bit, but that would be a different kind of scenario if you're going to just go that route, and maybe a guy that is a little bit more conducive to Avery specifically if you're trying to really help him out this year.
Well, I think if you were going with Conor Riley as the overall offensive coordinator and not a co-OC label attached to it, and you were just targeting a quarterback coach, I think a guy that they're interested in would be Justin Hoover, who runs Spennett Academy, coaches some of the Elite 11 quarterbacks. He's never been a college coach, I believe, but he coaches some of the top prep quarterbacks. They come to him. He was Avery's personal quarterbacks coach as well. There's a relationship there. I think he's in Kansas City. DY actually has interviewed him when Avery committed to K-State. DY interviewed him for the pod. Actually, we played a little 5-10 minute soundbite of him analyzing Avery's game for you guys on 3-Mall. I think Justin Hoover would be a guy that they would have some interest in and talk to. But if they go with a co-OC situation, then they probably can't go with Hoover because, I don't think they would probably put that level of responsibility on his shoulders to be a passing game coordinator too on top of it if it was a strictly quarterback coach. And he might be perfectly capable to do both, but I don't know if that's a direction they would go. So they go co-OC. I think they'd probably look for a more experienced college guy to that's coach quarterbacks, but also man passing game. And that's where I get back to Matt Wells. I think I also saw, though, that Matt Wells is still getting paid by Texas Tech, which is part of why he's working as an offensive analyst at Oklahoma, as part of his buyout from Tech was like a $7.4 million buyout. So I don't know. I think he'd probably be willing to, come up here for the right number and everything, but I don't know. We'll see what transpires. I wouldn't be surprised if there's an additional change on the coaching staff, to be honest. I don't have any names, but nothing would surprise me at this point based off what we've heard. I think there could potentially be, an additional change, maybe two on the staff at some point. Timing, I don't know. Names, I don't know. But I wouldn't surprise me.
Still, it's just I feel like K-State operates in a bit of a different sphere where a lot of this is happening later than you would expect it to. A lot of the stuff would happen pre-bowl game. K-State has waited post-bowl game and post-transfer portal window, which will close on January 2nd, which I definitely think would be another motivation there. We didn't talk a lot about the defense. Anything you want to throw in here at the end of the show?
I feel that. You're right. I feel bad about that. That overlooked defense, they ended up being outside of that Iowa State game, had a really solid season. The defense ended up giving up 13 points in the game. I mean, the fake punt resulted in a 60-yard touchdown. Other than that, though, defense was really solid for the most part in the game. North Carolina State couldn't do anything via the pass. So K-State's defense was rock solid. Not a lot of pass rush, but I don't have any big issues with the way the defense played. They just kind of went about their business once again this year. And what did they hold North Carolina State to? 128 passing yards?
Something like that. Let's see. I'm seeing 164.
Okay. I think that's right. North Carolina State had a 40-yard completion and a 38-yard completion. So 2 passes really accounted for around 60% of their passing yards in the game. I thought Jacob Parrish was good at corner. Keenan Garber was solid. Safeties were really good. I mean, that's another thing to keep in mind, John. That K-State did that. They held North Carolina State to 13 points. And I know they weren't an offensive juggernaut, but you held North Carolina State to 13 points, and you didn't have Uso Seumalo, your starting nose tackle. You didn't have Kobe Savage, who entered the portal about 3 weeks ago at safety, and you didn't have Will Lee. So you were down 3 starters in this bowl game that were playing for you and starting just a month ago against Iowa State in Manhattan. So you had guys playing out there, and maybe a little. I don't think there were a lot of guys playing out of position, but maybe playing more snaps. Colby McAllister. Thought BJ Payne had a really nice game. He actually led K-State in tackles with 10. He had that lowered the boom on Brennan Armstrong, the North Carolina State quarterback, on that 2-point conversion. I thought K-State's defense was good. Desmond Purnell was good. So now we'll see where they go into next season, as they've got a lot of guys that are coming back. They're going to have Austin Moore, Desmond Purnell, Rex Van Wy, linebacker, Jake Clifton, Asa Newsome coming off of injuries. Feel pretty good about that as long as those guys recover where they'll be at linebacker. You're going to get Uso back at nose tackle, and you're getting longer and bigger at defensive end. I'm excited about the prospects of where they go from there at defensive end, which, by the way, shout out to Glenn Duke, those guys playing in the bowl game as well. They certainly could have opted out, and they chose to play. And, you got Sigel and BJ Payne back at safety. You got Garber and Parrish back at corner. Justice James played a decent amount. You got Colby McAllister back, and they're bringing in some transfers at safety. So I feel decent about this defense heading into next year. But again, wouldn't hate adding a transfer nose tackle as give you another body there, and then also a transfer corner.
I'm seeing, by the way, this is not related to the K-State defense, but just saw an alert pop up that Cam Ward is going to the draft. So as it relates to the portal market with Will Howard, if people are still concerned with that, it's about the most coveted guy out there. I guess maybe KJ Jefferson would be another one, but you watch the bowl game performances may have changed things, because what's the kid, Miller Moss, is that his name? It's USC, who really lit it up. That may change Will Howard's calculus about wanting to go to USC or not, but then Ohio State looked like a dumpster fire at quarterback, so maybe Will Howard becomes an option there, because that had been mentioned. Or Miami seemed to be really hot to trot for Cam Ward, so I don't know if that opens back up for Will Howard too, and he may just say screw it and enter the draft. Very interesting how that's played out.
And what DJ Ngalale, I probably mispronounced that too, is probably down to Florida State or going pro. I think I saw reported, which I would think Florida State would be his option. I don't think he's done enough to prove himself at the NFL level. I look, we were told from when the time that Will Howard entered the portal, the NFL was a real possibility. There was something he was seriously considering, and he's in a pretty good spot right now, especially with Cam Ward now entering. I mean, he's going to be in demand and maintain still being in demand. So I'd be curious what he does.
Well, I honestly just think like financially, the move would be to stay in college. Like I don't know what.
I agree. I would assume there's
like even if he got on an NFL roster, he'd probably be making twice as much in college next year.
I completely agree. Probably going to get, I would just guess, a 7-figure NIL deal to stay in college. And if you're a 5th, 6th round pick, you're making the league minimum. There's no guarantee you even make the roster, right? If you're that. And then if you do, you're probably making $500K, whatever the league minimum is in the NFL. But there's no year-to-year guarantee either. They can cut you at any point. I think you'd be prudent to probably stay in college. But again, maybe he's getting different draft feedback and is being told he'll be taken higher in the draft. Look, I candidly did not foresee Will Howard being targeted by USC, Lincoln Riley, and Ohio State, and Ryan Day either when he entered the portal. And he clearly was very coveted and sought after. So they see something there. And that's not a knock on Will. I think Will's outstanding. But, that level, I didn't necessarily see that.
Yeah, it'll just be fascinating to see where that winds up. I mean, that's really dragged on for a long time. And I'd been hearing like maybe a decision by the end of the week for Will, and now here we are at Monday on January 1st. So, I don't know. Interesting process to watch play out. Anything else before we get out of here?
No, I think other than I will just say that we'll probably record another pod this week. We'll get DY back in the mix in a couple days and get some intel from him. So be on the lookout for that. And then I would also say, I think we're going to launch a basketball version of the Curry Sexton pod we do, 3-Mall bonus. We didn't launch that this week, probably the day after the Chicago State game, and kind of look ahead to Big 12 play. We're going to do that show with Pearson McAtee, former K-State men's basketball player and partner of Wildcat NIL. So we're going to keep things going with Wildcat NIL and have that. So be on the lookout for that show this week. And then Curry and I will kind of record a season wrap-up for our 3-Mall bonus for the football version. To be decided on when we'll have that out, but be on the lookout for that too. We'll still have plenty of content coming your way. Check out our Patreon as well at patreon.com/3Maw, where we did a live post game after the game on what night was that? Thursday? Gosh, I can't even remember.
Thursday.
I mean, and shout out to Riverbank Brewing in Council Grove, who did the NIL deal with us and brought players on the show. I watched the bowl game at the brewery down there, and it was awesome. I encourage everybody to go check them out. So.
Yeah, we appreciate Home Field Apparel. We appreciate our friends at Holiday Distillery as well. Thanks to Nick Springer behind the scenes. And thank you for spending some time here in the new year with us, listening to the wrap-up of the football season. Of course, we'll keep you up to date on basketball as we roll on through the season. So until next time, we will talk to you then. Thanks for listening. For Cole Manbeck, I'm John Kurtz here on 3Maw.